right, we're back talking all things Private Eye with the director, Jack Cook.
Thank you, Los, for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for being here, brother. Let's just get right into it. What brought you onto this film? What made you want to direct Private Eye?
Well, that's a great question, and I love telling the story. Basically, I was writing a movie, and I've got 60 pages in before I realized, dang, I'm going to need like, $20 to $40 million. So I was like, man, I need to make a more reasonable budget for my first big movie.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, well, 2040, I like that budget too, but I just felt at the time, this is over 10 years ago, so I was fresher in the Hollywood, and I didn't know as many investors or studio people at all. It was coming straight from passion, and I watched an interview or read an interview from James Cameron, the guy who did like Terminator.
Titanic and Terminator and all.
So do you know how long it took him to write the original version of Terminator?
No idea.
It took him 7 days. So I read that article, and
7 days?
Yeah, so I read the article, and I was like, I'm going to beat that motherfucker. And so I wrote the first draft of The Private Eye in actually 4 days. And then, it took 8 years of development, but the first draft was done in 4 days.
4 day. How many pages is that, first of all?
The first draft, it was at least 90 pages.
How the heck do you do 90 pages in 4 days? I mean, are you just locked in? You don't leave the desk? Or
yes.
You like?
It's like 12, 14 hours for 4 days, and I barely ate. I think if you're so passionate about something, you don't even want to eat. You're not thinking about food. You're just trying to get it to, because you don't want to lose the thought, right? You want to.
Yeah, you got the juices flowing. You got to,
And I think actually first and last drafts are very good to do in a quick amount of time, where the development in between, like the 100 drafts in between the first and the last, I think is very important to take your time. But I do like writing the first draft personally. Everybody does it different, but I like writing the first draft to get it all out of my head and on the paper, and it might go a completely different direction.
Right.
But if it's out on the paper, it's like starting with a block, and then you're starting to make this sculpture, and a shape turns out, and then you still don't know what it is, but it looks better than a block, and then you do a little more definition, and you put shadow the eyes, and eventually it turns into a sculpture.
Yeah.
So that's how the script kind of became for me. The first draft definitely was not the last, and it took a long time to get to the final draft. We were even writing some of these scenes as we're filming. One of the writers, Hope IE, especially, he while we're filming, we came up with certain ideas. There's a lot of beautiful things when you're doing an independent movie. You hit a lot of roadblocks. And
you have to be able to be dynamic, it sounds like.
And there's two ways to go. You either give up and cheapen it, or you try to think of a better way to do it. And there was a lot of that in this production, because it was a passion project with it didn't have the biggest budget, but it had enough.
I love to hear when people say things like that, when they say, we had a decision to make, whether do we cheapen the product or do we find out a different way to do and achieve what we want to get done. So I think I like to hear when people, they're not like, well, so we decided to cut 3 scenes because, no, let's find a different way to get that done.
That's laziness.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
Laziness, and you don't want to do the work, but art does not come from a comfortable place.
That's right.
And that's where we were. The specific scene that I'm thinking about right now that we doctored was a gun store. So we were supposed to shoot one of the scenes in a gun store, and we shot this movie during 2020. Believe it or not, guns were super popular, so these gun stores had lines.
Especially during COVID.
I was serious. Everybody was dang, I need to arm myself.
I remember seeing on the news Smith & Wesson stock went up like 10-15% in the span of a couple months. So we couldn't film in the gun store we originally were going to shoot in. Okay.
So we had to think outside the box, and I think what we did is even better than if we filmed at a gun store, because we actually took the time and did the work.
Yeah. Was that the scene in the trailer where Elliot's character is like, what about those guns on the wall?
Yes. It turned into an amazing thing. And that was the scene that Hope actually rewrote. And what it did is we got 2 more amazing actors to be a part of the project. It was Elijah Booth and Jay Reeves, because we had 2 extra roles for him now that we added the scene.
That's awesome. I love that. He's like, what guns?
What guns? Yeah, exactly. It's definitely got some dark comedy and situational comedy to it. It's a mystery overall.
Very
It's got a lot of romance in it, but it's got a lot of situational comedy where it's not a
Yeah.
joke. You're not telling me a joke and we're all
Right.
laughing. It's more
Just
like
what's
this
happening is
character, and,
actually
yeah, it's kind of ironic what happened to this guy.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned earlier about passion. Where do you find your passion or your inspiration for what you're writing?
God, the universe or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. That's the thing that continues to give me hope.
Yeah.
I first started wanting to be a filmmaker, I guess, real young when I fell in love with movies. Movies taught me a lot. I liked watching them.
Yeah.
And at some point, I was like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
I want to tell stories and make movies.
Very cool. Yeah.
But definitely passion. I got to give it up to the Most High. Now that I've got family and kids, I really like making art with them. But
Yeah.
art, I think it's okay to be very selfish with. I make these movies for myself 100%.
Yeah.
And I really hope people will like it, but I am not like the studios. Studios, I feel a lot of times
they're making a product.
they chase trends.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you want to chase trends, that's going to cost a lot of money just because you're trying to do what's hot now. And what's
Yeah.
hot now is not going to be hot in a month.
No,
Okay. So
not at all.
what I like doing is making it for myself to where I want to make the trends. I know if I make it
Yeah.
for myself and and a movie takes 100 to 200 people to make. And those are the low budget ones.
Right.
Those are the low budget ones. But I like making the movie for myself, and I hope the people that I work with, they make the movie for themselves. I
Yeah.
always, it's not hate it, but I always, I don't like it when people say, oh, I'm helping you out with your movie, and if you're working on
Yeah,
it,
it's
like,
your movie too.
Nah, man,
Yeah.
this is your movie. You're
See,
on the.
that is the best attitude I think to have, especially working in the music industry. Far too often you work with artists or producers where you feel more like another piece of gear in the studio.
Yeah.
So I think when you run across a director or producer like yourself that wants other people to feel like, hey, this is yours as well,
Yeah.
it's empowering, and ultimately it's going to get you probably the best product.
Yeah, because what the movie is not you and it's not me. It's
Yeah.
what is in between us and what we create. So you need to be on the same level as me to where you're giving
Yeah.
your all
Yep.
to making the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite movies? Some things that we should watch, that you think if you were sitting down with somebody like, you got to watch these 3 movies, which ones are you giving them?
Well, I got to give a big shout out to the guy who does inspire me a lot as a teacher I used to have. His name was Mike Nichols. He was a film director.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the 2 movies that I'll tell you my 3 favorite movies from him.
Okay.
That I think
Let's do
everybody
it.
should watch
All right.
because the story and the directing and how that movie was made is so inspiring. So don't only watch the movie, watch the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
First one is his most famous one is called The Graduate.
Okay.
That it was made in '67, I think, released in '68.
So Hackman.
Hackman.
Yeah. Dustin Hoffman, not Gene
but,
Hackman. Yeah.
But he was very close to Gene Hackman as
Yeah.
well. And I don't know if you knew this. It's random. You say that Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman, before they were famous, they were roommates and friends. I don't
I
know
have
if
no
you knew
idea.
that.
No.
I'll tell you a little story that I heard
Yeah.
through the grapevine of my school. So, because they're all big buddies. The theater is very small. Film's
Right.
very small. Music industry is very small
Yeah.
because you know all the same people.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman were roommates back in the day. And apparently there's a story about Dustin Hoffman borrowing $1 from Gene Hackman every day for coffee or whatever. And
Every day.
Well, every day. And then I don't know how long it went on, but it went on a long time, long enough to where eventually Gene Hackman was cleaning up or something and knocked over a coffee can, and a bunch of single dollars spilled out of it. Dustin Hoffman apparently was saving the money,
Yeah.
not spending it. He was saving the money. But anyway, so they were very close friends. But yeah, Mike did exactly what we did. His first movie was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, where he was that was his first directing movie. But he was a theater director before that. And his first play, it was with him and this other actor who wasn't famous at the time, Robert Redford. And so he worked very horizontal.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of what everybody in this movie, The Private Eye, is all about.
Yeah.
It's about being the best at something instead of being the most popular. A lot of people, when they come out to the movies and to come
Right.
out to Hollywood, they're like, oh, I want to get the most famous guy, you
Yeah.
know, and he's going to bring people to the movie theaters.
Right.
Well, he's going to charge you $20 million, and then you've got,
Yeah.
you know, you've got $300,000 to make your movie. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, believe it or not, they do
They'll
that.
do
They'll
that.
spend $1 million on a famous person who, you know, he cares about that check.
That's how you get a jiggly.
And then yeah, exactly. And then they spend, you know, $300,000 or so on the movie, and
Yeah.
it's a lower quality, and
Yeah.
it's not a classic compared to what we did for The Private Eye. Is we just picked the best person for that role, or the best
Right.
person for that crew, or whatever
That was
they
like
do.
Rafa,
Yes.
King Chip,
Yes.
Doc.
Yes.
You know, all these guys that came through and just gave you, you know, performances that you're not going to get at that price from, you know, anybody else.
Well, yeah, and they didn't do it for the money, you know. They did
There
it
it is.
because they
art.
believed in the project,
Yeah.
and they wanted it to succeed. And more than the project, they believed in themselves, and that's something I look for more than
Yeah.
anything when I work with somebody. Not even casting.
Right.
Do you believe in yourself?
Yeah.
And if you believe in yourself, you're already ahead of a lot of people, you know.
Man, that's deep right there, brother. So when we're not doing movies, what's some things that you like to get into outside of movies, or are you just
I like
are you
that.
dialed in all the time?
Well, right now it's all movies all the way, but I do have two wonderful children. A 15-year-old Michael Cook, who goes by Big Thorn. He's a hip hop artist and
Nice.
everything. So yeah, he's coming out and up. And my youngest, Jack Cook the Eighth, he's
Yeah.
a real big sports guy. And then
Very
my
cool.
wife Rose, but both my sons and I, we really like camping and outdoors, and wilderness.
Awesome.
I do like music as well too. I play music and I sing, but
Okay.
I've learned that if you want something, you better focus solely on that, and you will get that. If you want to make commercials, you'll make commercials. If you want to
Yeah.
make movies, you'll make movies. But if you spend too much time on too many things, you're selling yourself short, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be as great as it could if you focused all your energy and time on
Yeah.
one thing.
Good at
So-
everything, but not great at one thing, basically.
yeah, and because
Yeah.
people tell me, "Hey, how's it been?" You know, and everybody, I've been telling people I've been making The Private Eye for over 10 years now. So, people, you know, they ask me, and I'm still doing the same thing I was, but some things that are great take time. You know, the pyramids weren't built in a day, kind of thing, unless it was aliens. But anyway, I definitely like taking my time and focusing on very few things, and I
Yeah.
do have family, so anytime I do have spared, I'm a
With
family
the
man.
Awesome. So you wrote on the movie, directed,
Yep.
produced. You're involved with the marketing.
Yep.
I mean, just basically everything. What is the
I
most?
don't like taking credit for everything
Well,
because
no.
I don't like movies
I know you have
that
a
do
team
that.
with you,
I
right, for
I don't.
sure.
But you're right to the fact that I have to supervise everything,
Yeah.
and if I didn't, I don't think it would get the full amount of care that it does.
What's the most challenging hat that you've had to wear for The Private Eye?
I'll tell you this: the most important job on a film set is whichever one you're working on. So what I do is, if I'm writing, that's the most important part, and it's all focus. And you know that's one way. But to answer your question, what was the most difficult? I think they all were difficult because this is my directorial debut as a feature film director.
Yeah.
And it's all a new game in a way, and it's learning the process and learning how. You know, it's so funny. You have a goal, right?
Yeah.
And this goal might be, I'll finish this movie in 3 months, or you know, it takes way
Or
longer than
finish
3
this
months.
this
But-
script in 5 days.
5 days. Yeah, you have these goals, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times it'll take a lot longer for me because I wasn't going to sacrifice the quality. And so what I would do is, the point I'm trying to make is, you have to set these goals even if you don't hit that mark, because you wouldn't even got to that first step unless you set that goal.
Yeah.
And even though it might sound ridiculous, you needed to say that and do that for your own mental
Right.
health and to get it completed.
Yeah.
So that I found that out a lot. To answer your question, it was all a learning experience, and
Yeah.
I think every movie's a learning experience. My next one, I plan to have a much bigger budget.
Right.
So that's a whole different movie than this
Yeah.
one. And you always think it's going to be easier, but you don't know what type of challenges you
Yeah.
have. And if you try to tell me, like you try to teach me about these challenges, I don't understand it
Till
until
you
I
go through
actually
it.
did it.
Yeah, you
And
gotta go through it yourself.
Yeah.
Get burnt a little bit to see how hot that fire is. Yeah.
well said. And
Yeah.
that's a lot of what Mike Nichols would tell me. He would do some of the
Yeah.
biggest movies in the world, and he would tell me some of the best advice. I was so inspiring, but I didn't know what he meant until I was on set and it happened to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, shit, that's what he was talking about.
Well, what's one that is there one that stands out that you experienced doing the private eye that you could share with us?
A story?
Yeah, or like something that he might have told you, or some advice that you kind of saw coming true as you were doing it, or that you sat back and like, dang, that's exactly what he was telling me about.
I wish I could think of a better one, but I do have one that I could tell you about.
Yeah.
And one thing he didn't like about what was coming with newer films is the amount of cuts they have. So a lot of newer films, they get coverage, it's called. And what coverage is I might have multiple cameras. Like I might have 2 to 5 cameras.
Okay.
And I'm just the director sets up the situation,
Yeah.
and these cameramen and everybody, they just capture all these moments, inserts and
Right.
and then when you're in the editing booth, that's where a lot of the directing is for that type of movie, because you got to pick the best shots, and this might fit here. The camera didn't make it here, so we could just cut it over here. So it's a lot of cuts. So
Yeah.
what Mike would say is he likes longer shots. And so working on this movie, it is a film noir, neo-noir. So as filming it, I already knew I wanted longer shots because I wanted to look like old school.
Yeah.
But I understood why blocking was much more important than coverage, because it just keeps it so much more interesting. And for somebody who's really into movies as
Yeah.
well, every time you cut, it kind of tells the brain, like, this is a change of something changed.
Yeah.
And that's so what our jobs are is all we do as filmmakers is create distractions to where the audience is not watching a movie. I don't want the audience to think they're watching
yeah.
videos. I want them
Right.
to think it's a life. It's part of life.
Well, so I mean, that sounds like not having those coverages is going to give you it's going to be more challenging, because you don't have it. Not to cheapen that, because I'm sure there's a strategy that's good for there, but it almost sounds like it's kind of like backup, like redundancies.
It's more challenging in the pre-production to where we have rehearsals. We had a lot of rehearsal
Okay.
for the private eye.
Because everybody's got to hit those marks and be where they're supposed to be for
But
the camera.
the editing is a lot easier because you don't have to sit through and watch a bunch of BS shots. You knew there's
Yeah.
a quote. I didn't make it. Another director made it, but it's I'm a director, not a selector. And what that means is like, before I make the movie, it's all up in here. A majority of the time, I might improv some things that one of the other producers or cinematographers suggest.
Right.
But a majority of the time, it's all, I've already made it. Each shot, everything, it's already in my freaking head. I'm a director, not a selector. But
That's a
the
cool-
guys
I
who
like
do,
that. I like
I
that
didn't make
saying.
that. I can't claim that. I don't even want to tell you who did. Yeah. It was Quentin Tarantino. He said that, but I don't want to be cliche.
Everybody loves a good Tarantino quote,
Oh, yeah.
man. That's
okay.
that's
I'll
one of the
remember
goats,
that.
man. We like Quentin, man. Tell me, what, if any, challenges did you experience as independent filmmaker that you didn't foresee? Like, I'm sure budget, that's already on your mind, right? Like, at some point something's gonna have to give. You're gonna have to figure out ways to do other things. Is there things that you encountered on this journey that you were actually surprised about, that you're like, well, I didn't see that coming?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, one of the most recent, a lot. I learned, I don't even want to say some of these things, but one of the
But what you can say, what you're
I
comfortable
can
saying.
say, and what I feel right about saying is the most thing I learned was patience. And this is the truth. This is how you say it.
Yeah.
I'm always rushed, but I never rush. And that is the truest thing for a director. And you should, everybody on a set should do that, because even being a director, all these heads of the departments, they all have questions for you because they want to know the style of the film and, just what the vision is, so they're all connected.
Right.
So everybody's trying to rush me,
Yeah.
but you can't rush, because when you rush, you fuck up.
Yeah.
And that's something I really learned how to utilize and embrace my patience in this project. Like I said, it's been over 10 years now.
Yeah.
So, it took me 8 years to raise the budget for it. And, most people, they would have given
I
up.
would say 10 years to get a project off the ground, that would for
It
sure
would've broken a lot
of people, for sure.
But-
I mean, and this is destined for success, I feel, when you have things like that you take that time to cultivate, and it takes that long to get it, the right pieces together. I think that you got a good recipe for success when you have those type of
Thank you.
elements coming together.
Yeah, I like calling
Yeah.
it persistent patience.
That's
You
awesome,
can't
bro.
wait for it.
Yeah.
You gotta keep persistent. But
Yeah. I know you guys have been knocking down a lot of doors, making a lot of phone calls to get
Thank
this
you.
thing in theaters.
Thank you.
I mean, I know I'm excited for it to get there.
Thank you.
I'm sure everybody else is excited for it.
Thank you.
This has been more talking with. Oh man, I'm fucking.
No, you're good. Reset and action. Retake.
It's been more talking Private Eye with this time the writer, producer, director, Swiss Army knife of the film. Really, our
like
brother
that.
James Cook. Man, thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank you. And hey, just to correct that last part, James
I
Cook
said
is the
James.
sailor. He's the sailor that.
James Cameron with.
Hey, I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, in Hawaii, they called James Cook, Captain Cook. They thought he was the sex god when he showed up and discovered the Hawaiian island. And all the Hawaiians gave the women to James Cook and his crew. And then he left. He
James
got
Cook.
forced to leave after he was fucking and eating so much feast that there was a storm and the boat breaks and he's forced to come back to the Big Island of Hawaii. And when he comes back, they're like, "Oh, he's not a god. He had to
shit!
come back.
Give us the women back."
No, so they killed him on that island, and like his. But it's pretty awesome because he's an asshole European explorer too. So like it's funny they got a statue for him on the Big Island, but it's all graffitied because all the natives are like, "Fuck this guy, he stole the land and give it." But anyway, let's do this exit one more time.
My bad. All right.
No, you're good.
Well, it was more. Fuck my mind. All right, guys. Well, that was more talking Private Eye. Here with the producer, director, man of many talents, Mr. Jack Cook. Brother, appreciate you for sitting down with me.
Thank you. Seriously, Lil. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
We're looking forward to seeing the movies in theaters soon, nationwide. So keep your eyes out. Get ready. It's going to be hitting this theater near you very soon.
That's right. See you on the red carpet.
That's right, baby. Let's go.